So, hello and welcome to Level Up Your Talents Abroad, a series of inspiring interviews of expats where we uncover through their stories the talents they have developed. We are exploring the behind the scene because too often we only see the end result of the expatriation and we're missing out on the process and what it really takes to get where they are today. I'm your host, Angus Lundy, and in this interview, we are going to Montreal in Canada, and we have the pleasure of welcoming Clémence to this series. Hi, Clémence.
Hi, Anne.
How are you?
Good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. We are thrilled to have you here today with us, and thank you again for sharing your story. So
Yes.
to start, could you please give us some context about like when did you move? How long have you been living there? And basically, what is your expat journey?
Yes, sure. Yes, so actually, as you said, I'm based now in Quebec, in Montreal, but my expat journey has started a little bit, before that and in another country actually. So I would say that my expat journey has been happening in three different phases. So first it was as a student where I went to Peru to spend a year. So that was really my first experience living abroad. This was a decision of mine just because I fell in love with the country, just in the books, by watching documentaries and so on. So I did the first full year there as an intern, and after that I had a second sort of step in my expat journey where I went to Brazil, where I actually went to live with my husband. So there I spent around 5 years in Rio de Janeiro. And after that, so it was then 8 years ago now that we are in Canada. We moved to Quebec, to Montreal, and so here we are. And I work here in talent acquisition.
Awesome journey. You really went from one type of culture to another. So I'm definitely looking forward to this interview and dive into the how you're going to manage these cultural differences. But
Mhm.
first, I would like to go back to the first year when you arrived in Montreal. So
Mhm.
from Brazil to Montreal.
Mhm.
So I guess between what you have imagined and what was the reality, there was a gap that you want to share with us.
Yeah, so that's interesting actually because the standpoint from which I was actually comparing things was not very much from a French perspective, but really much more from a Brazilian one. Because, willing it or not, I spent very few years as a professional in France. I only did an apprenticeship there. So my very first experience as a professional was in Brazil. My experience of started living officially, let's say, by myself and as a couple and so on was in Brazil. So everything that I was exposed to when I moved to Canada was from the perspective of someone having settled somehow in Brazil first. So I was very much comparing things with Brazil much more than with France, right? So this is important to keep in mind. So in Brazil, everything is very informal, and sort of loosey in a way, on the personal aspects of life, but also on the professional aspects. And even, in the streets, there are always, a lot of noise, a lot of people, a lot of smells, even like there's a lot of life everywhere, I would say. And this was the most shocking piece for me when I arrived, when we arrived actually as a family in Canada, was that everything was so clean. The streets were so big and neat, and there were nobody selling things on the street and so on. And I felt so, I don't know exactly, but it was not sad, but I felt it was so quiet,
Right.
and I missed the life really. So fortunately, at least we arrived in summer, so there were the festivals and so on, but still everything was very organized. So I missed the little market on the street, the things, and so this was a very personal of mine kind of you know change and discrepancy I noticed, and that affected me at the very beginning. Like morally, I was a little bit yeah, I was emotionally sad somehow because of that. And well, then things improved and so on. But this was my first impression and the first thing that really struck me at the beginning.
Yeah, I can imagine it was a shock. Like,
Hmm. And this is definitely
especially,
not what I was expecting.
yeah, yeah, I believe, yeah, that's right. And also, like, because we forget sometimes that our senses
Hmm.
are very, like you said, the noise, the smell, like everything was super activated, and we were
Hmm.
very, like, how do you say, sensitive to that without even noticing it. And it's just you realize that you don't have it
Hmm.
when you land, when it's
Exactly.
something is off when you land in Canada.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But
And
thank you for
now I can
sharing that.
relate to this, but in the moment, I couldn't know what it was. I just felt sad, but I couldn't know why. And it was not the emotion I was expecting to feel either. I thought it would be much more positive from the beginning. So that's why also
What
it was a little
what
bit.
were you expecting?
Well, actually, the reason why we moved from Brazil was because I was the one, looking for more security, more, somewhere where we were not that much at risk of, having something happening to us on the streets or anywhere. So I was the main, one pushing to go somewhere else. And we actually don't choose Canada, to be honest. Like my husband received an offer to go there, and we think about it and say, yeah, why not? But it was never something we thought about. We never said, oh, we would like to go to Canada.
So, what were the nice surprises
Yeah.
that you actually had?
Hmm. Well, with time, it was actually what was disappointing for me at the beginning that turned out into being an advantage because I'm very much, organized. I like neat things, like when everything is in its place and etc. So having that on a day-to-day, personally, professionally, etc., was a big plus for me and something I was struggling with in Brazil, all the informality, the way things are happening or not, the last minute cancellation, the everything like was very difficult for me to navigate. So discovering that, here it's not the case, it's very formal, when you say something, this thing will happen. There's a lot more commitment on the day-to-day life and again at work as well. This was very good for me. This is something I very much appreciate, and know that this was the environment I would now be living in was sort of a relief, actually. Yeah.
So, when you arrive in Canada, how long did it take you to find a job?
Yeah. So it took me 3 months. Actually, it's been pretty quick. I didn't search from the very beginning because first we had, to put my son in the daycare, we had to get everything settled, find the apartment and so on. So once all of this was very much organized, a month after, I would say, a month and a half, I started looking for a job, and I found it 1 month and a half after. So the job search per se was a little bit more than a month, so it's been very quick.
I guess you're feeling settled.
Yeah,
But can you tell us about your definition of feeling settled?
yeah.
What does it mean to you?
Yeah, so to have we have a home here. We own a home, so for sure this was a big step into feeling that we belong here. We are not, uh, passing. We are rooted here now. Also, we became Canadians, so that was kind of an emotional and certainly, also like a cornerstone of our journey here, in the way that we felt, because you can, before eventually I was not very much looking at the politics and so on. And now that I have to vote, I, very much started looking at it. So this was also part of feeling settled, and everything related to the kids' schools and daycare was also part of feeling, settled, knowing that they're good in their school, they're happy, and they started having some friends that they have from one year to the other, and so on. Makes us, feeling them settle, let's say, makes us feeling settled as well in a way. Hmm.
Yeah, fully integrated.
Yeah. And
Nice.
also, that's interesting because here, I mean, there are so many different people from different countries, as in many different places. But here in Quebec, it's very much the case. So different from maybe Brazil, where you're in French in a mix of many Brazilians. Here you are a French with Colombians, Brazilian, whatever. Like you have a mix of everything, of everyone. So it's maybe easier to feel settled because I felt less that I had to mix into a culture that was here. I just felt that I was, bringing my culture in a mix of other different cultures. So it's easier maybe to feel that you belong because you belong to something very um, multicultural.
Okay.
Yeah,
Nice.
that's a
I
way
like
to
the
actually.
perspective.
Hmm.
Yeah, you don't feel alone settling down in a,
You're not just you against everything else.
yeah, it's
Everything is pretty much fighting the same battle in a way.
okay. So yeah, you feel like because everyone is in the same boat as you.
Yeah. And so
Okay.
I wouldn't say, I don't very much like the idea of, they are kind of a family. No, to me, family is family, but in the sense that they all share the same story of not having lots of roots here, not having their actual family here. So sharing the same sort of, not loneliness in the sense that you feel lonely, but not having your village around, everyone's, is more inclined to build a village with you.
Yeah.
And that's the interesting point actually, because one thing that is very difficult, I found very difficult, is actually to be part of a group of friends of Quebecois, like
Okay.
because they have their very own cycle, and aside from work, it's very difficult for you to, be invited to their house or to participate to a dinner or something. They would very rarely invite you. And even if they do, maybe you'll go to a restaurant with, just a couple of the friend, but it will take very long for you to meet the family and be part of their cycle.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you mean by cycle?
Cycle, in the sense that they have their friends from college, from all their life, and they are very much with them. Uh, so they will go out with them, they will go on vacation with them. And so there's few room left for the
The
newcomers.
newcomers.
Yes.
Okay, I understand. I understand. Well, it's really nice to hear that you find your ground
Hmm.
in this country among these beautiful like international communities.
Yeah.
So how do you experience all these like multicultural experiences? How do you manage on your everyday life?
Yeah, maybe I have a facility, to be in this kind of environment because this is something I've been looking for from the very beginning. Let's say when I went to Peru, I was very much, hungry of living something different with different people, and I ended up marrying my husband who's Peruvian as well. So I already sort of started my life in a mix of culture, and this is very much what makes me happy, and in an environment in which I feel very much comfortable. So um, so yeah, to me it's no big effort, you know so being like living abroad, it's pretty much the same. I don't know if it's a state of mind, being just open and not and I'm not looking friends in every place I'm going. Like I'm just entering there and look. I don't know, because sometimes the expressions comes to my mind in other language, but just to say that there's a phrase that says, if life gives you lemon, you do a lemonade. Is that the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah? Okay, I don't know if it translates well, but this to say that I just come to where I come, and I just adapt, and live with the way of living here. So that's it. It's actually pretty easy for me.
About the Canadian culture. Is there anything that stands out that you would like to share with us?
Mm, it's difficult again for me to talk about Canadian culture because, as I said, specifically here in Montreal, it's so multicultural that it's hard to perceive something that is very local. I mean, this is my perspective on
Yeah,
things.
yeah.
So maybe this actually, like the fact that you can come from anywhere and you'll find your little place. You know, there's room for everyone. That's
Maybe this is it.
maybe this is
Maybe
it
this
then.
is
Yeah,
it. But there is room for everyone,
yeah,
and
and
you
that's
feel
why
welcome.
yeah, and this is important for us as a couple coming from two different countries, different cultures. Um, to find a place where both of us can feel we can adapt and be welcome, not just one having to adapt as well. Hmm.
I'm curious, how do you manage this triangle um,
Hmm.
cultural situation between you, your husband, and the kids are going to school? So of course they are a lot like they experience also different cultures. So how does that look like in your home?
Yeah, well, it's actually a question for the future as well because I always wonder what my kids will feel like, like what they belong to. Will they feel more French, more Canadian, more Brazilian even? My firstborn was born in Brazil or even Peruvian. I don't know, but for us, it's very simple. Like well, my husband and I, we speak Spanish. I speak French with my kids, and amongst them, they speak also French. And they go to the French school actually, so maybe it makes it easier for them. I mean, I wouldn't say easier because I believe if they were in a Canadian school, they would be as comfortable as they are in a French one. But just this to say that they are in a school that has the same sort of culture than mine, and that's even funny to see that they have the same sort of jokes and little stories and songs that I was told when I was a kid myself, even being here in Canada. So this to say that they are very much in a very French environment. So I don't know. I believe that they sometimes they ask questions, and but there's still something that is very important for. I mean, I believe the way we are structured at home is that although we come from very different cultures, we share roots, in terms of values and religion.
Mm.
Religion. So I believe this makes it work, in our case.
Yeah, you have the foundations.
Yeah, we have a foundation in common for sure, and also very similar families in
Okay.
terms of how they are built, even the number of children, and even the way they think and so on. So it's not so much of an adaptation, but I mean there were different sort of things on which we had to adapt. But the yeah, again, the ground is the same,
Yes.
so we can easily build on that.
Yeah, when you have the same value, you can really build on
Yeah.
that.
Hmm.
So, looking back on your experience, is there anything you would have done differently?
Hmm. Um, not very much in the sense of like logistically and practically, but in Brazil, I think I wish I would have gone a little bit more with the flow of how things were going there, because I've been being myself and hence resistant to this sort of more loosey culture a lot. So being more flexible at that time in that sense would have helped me a lot more. So although I was all open to adapt, there were still parts of me that were resisting, and so I believe that this is what I would have done differently. And I always, even I say sometimes to my husband, maybe I would be happier now in Brazil than I've been when I was there. Not that I wasn't happy, but I could be more, I could enjoy life more there now because I'm more relaxed than I used to be. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, we are growing up, right?
Exactly,
We
we're
are,
changing.
we
Yeah.
learn, we grow up, we learn from our experiences, and then
Mhm.
you wonder, why did I do that? And
Yeah,
because you were another person at that time. So,
exactly.
and it takes time. It takes time.
Yes.
So about this learning, so what if you reflect on your journey? So what what did you learn on your full expat journey? Okay, so you just shared about you would have probably enjoy more Brazil if you have
Hmm.
less resistance, but what else?
Hmm. No, maybe a key for me has been to be a team with my husband because at first, in Peru I was by myself, but there were also no big commitments, so it was pretty easy. There were no sort of big decisions involved, no having to open a bank account, which is to me the the moment that marks, in the life when you become a true person living abroad is when you open a bank account because you can be living, somewhere for a long time, but opening a bank account sometimes, you have to see how it works, and sometimes it's so different. In some countries it's all digital, in some others you have to go on site, etc. Like it's a whole different experience, although it seems that it's something simple. In Brazil, at least, it was not very much. So it was something that marked, the fact that I was actually living in the country full or not. So in Peru, it was not the same. All of this to say that my experience in Peru was a little bit lighter. But when things became, more committed and more serious, as I would say, as an expat, I was fortunate that I was a team because doing it just by myself would have been a whole different story, you know. And so having the task very well organized between who does what has facilitated everything, of course, in
Yeah.
my. Mm.
I like the idea that you brought like a teamwork.
Oh yeah,
Like it's a teamwork and like everything, okay, in these cases, your husband, it can be also other people like help you on the way.
yeah.
Uh, and that's true. Like we don't have to do that alone.
No,
It's
very
so
much not.
much easier to be in team and also especially when you're going, you have the ups, but also when you go on the downs, it's good
Hmm.
to have this team mindset.
Yeah. And that's true what you say. It could be, in my case, it was him. It could have been something more external, but also there were a program in the company of my, husband, and we use that as well. A program that helps you, getting more knowledgeable about the local, way of doing things and so on. So being that directly through the company or externally is something very important, I believe. If you mainly if you come as a family, where there are more stakes, like yeah,
Yeah, I agree. It's different. If you're alone, somehow you figure things out.
I believe
When
so.
you
It's
have
not
the
good
family,
to be
it's
yeah, to be helped, but yeah, the more you come with others and more
yeah, you're
responsibility.
responsible.
Absolutely.
So it's a different ball game. I
Yeah,
fully
the
agree.
more help you need for sure.
Um, how do those learnings influence your decision today as a mother, as a
Mhm.
manager? What did you learn?
Yeah, maybe I'll go the professional route to answer this one, but for sure, like whenever, because and I work in recruitment, right? So often we hire people that are just just arrived, that are newcomers, or even people that we hire abroad, so they will have to come. And it's really to help them manage the expectations and try to make sure they understand very much the context in which they're coming to to help them avoid bad surprises or deceptions and so on, so as much as we can, right? Like be advisors in that sense, having passed by this ourselves, not as a you should do that and that, but more answering their questions with honesty. So, in that sense, I think that having gone through that makes me more inclined to, again, bring good advice to people who are in this journey, but also to be more, kind with people who are in the situation right now, and understand that if they are maybe struggling somehow at work, and it's because maybe they are settling themselves on the private aspect of their life first. So giving them some grace and having patience with them, and not think that, okay, they are here, so they should just do exactly as everyone else.
I like that you actually bring that topic of because getting ready, prepared, and adapting professionally is one thing, but also on your personal life. And it
Mm,
takes so much space, and the impact of the personal life on your work, on your performance is real. If
of
the
course.
family is struggling,
Mhm.
so then of course your mental bandwidth is not like full on at work, and that makes sense. And it's really nice to hear that because of your experience and you know what it takes to
Exactly.
create a life abroad, you understand them when you're in the recruitment process.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's really nice to hear.
Mhm.
um to wrap up, I ask this question to everyone.
Yeah.
Imagine your best friend is coming to Montreal next month.
Mhm.
What would be your top three pieces of advice?
Three. Um, well, first, don't think that just because here we speak French, you don't need the English, because that's pretty much the opposite. You can live here just with the English, but you can't, I mean, very hardly just with the French. So this is something to keep in mind. The other thing is to maybe try to give it a shot during winter if you can before, just so you make sure that you'll be okay with that, for the next many years maybe, because sometimes it's a lot if you're not used to it. And the third would be to research very thoroughly about the cost of living and the salary you could make, because sometimes it's misleading, because here we spend much more on different things that we don't in France. Like the budget is structured differently, so you need to really study that. I would say research on that to understand. Also how the taxes are working, because you have a lot of taxes here. So really try to figure out as much as you can how you are actually going to earn, at the end of the month, let's say, what is actually going to come in your pocket, and how much you're going to spend. Because it's again, you can make it and that's okay, but it's just that the structure is very different from France. So you cannot apply the same sort of calculation based just on a salary you will see. You have to take everything into account. So that's just the advice I could give. Yeah, these
Yeah,
three.
that's a really good advice. And actually, this is like in like many interviews I made, this advice actually come up quite often.
Mm-hmm.
So because we don't for we have our frame of reference of like our own country, right? Our own system.
Exactly.
And then you land in a country and just like, what, what? And
Yeah.
you can be really, really surprised.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for sharing these advice.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Okay, so I think this is it. Thank you so much,
Thank you, Anne.
Clémence, for sharing with us your journey, your story, your insights. To our listeners, we hope you found this conversation valuable and inspiring. Don't forget to register to our live Q&A and also to follow us on our LinkedIn page. All the links are in the description below. So see you soon in the next episode. Bye,
Thank you.
Clémence.
Bye bye.